A mother visited her son and received a sign from him. Regardless of whether we believe in life after death or not, sometimes we feel the presence of those we have lost. It's hard to prove, but there are repeated reports of incidents where the deceased have given their living relatives signs to let them know they are still with them and are doing well wherever they may be now. The loss of a loved one can be very challenging, and it's one of the hardest emotions to deal with. Especially when the deceased was a child. In such cases, it seems incredibly difficult to move on, but when something appears that seems to be a sign from the lost child, it can be comforting. In a tale from 2018, a mother named Mary Robinson, who lost her son Jack about 4 years earlier, still felt profound sadness over her son's death. Jack had always been a cheerful boy, almost always wearing a broad smile. However, his condition began to deteriorate after being diagnosed with a brain tumor, much to the sorrow of his twin brother, his 3 older sisters, and his mother. In the weeks before his death, it was very tough for the family, and it seemed nearly unbearable to watch their beloved Jack die at such a young age. Shortly after, on April 1, 2014, Jack died from the complications of his illness, and since then, his mother has not been able to move on. While many people would say that grief is a process that everyone must go through without accepting the situation, it is understandably difficult for a mother who has lost her little baby. Mary could hardly do anything without hearing or seeing her son, and it was unbearable for her. She never thought she would have to experience something like this and believes it can be truly devastating for any parent to endure such a loss. One thing that Mary believed helped her make some peace was that since Jack's death, she always went to him at the annual memorial services for his death, gave him flowers, and hoped that he somehow saw her. It was not easy, but it was something she believed she had to do. On the eve of his 3rd death anniversary, Mary began to feel the usual sadness associated with remembering him. The year she lost him was a tough one. On the anniversary of his passing, she desperately pleaded for a sign to feel at least a connection or to have a meeting with her son in some way. Early one Sunday morning, as I got into the car, I loudly said, "Jack, please give Mommy a sign," thinking I would see him after work. At 1 p.m., I left work and went to his resting place. Overwhelmed by emotions, I sat down next to Jack in the grass. Mary told Spiegel Online, as if little Jack had heard her. Something incredible happened later that day. Mary went to her son's grave to visit him as she had done every year since his death. She sat by the grave and out of nowhere, a little robin appeared and began to fly around her. The bird was not at all timid, as it approached Mary in a friendly manner. Then, a little robin flew around me, trying to land on me until it finally landed on my foot. It showed no fear at all, perched on a nearby tombstone. So I took out my phone to film how it approached me, flew up, and landed on my hand. It looked at me directly in the face repeatedly, and eventually, it landed on my shoulder and pecked at me a few times. Mary recounted, this was something quite incredible, and Mary couldn't help but pull out her phone to capture the moment her son had given her the sign she asked for. Mary was relieved to see the little robin and was very surprised by what she saw, as the bird even looked her in the eyes. She took a video at her son's grave and then shared it on Facebook with the caption, "I can't believe what just happened. I just wanted to visit my beloved young Jack. I just sat next to him on the ground, and then this happened." The sight of the bird was a significant event for Mary, and she immediately interpreted it as a sign from her son. In the spiritual community, robins are seen as a symbol indicating that loved ones are still present. Even on the website of the spiritual center, it clearly states that this bird is a visitor and should be appreciated as a welcome guest who brings gifts. Someone who has recently passed away might be showing you that they are watching over you, or simply letting you know that they still love you. Robins are attributed several meanings, with some claiming that they can also be linked to the beginning of something new. It can also be a sign to pay attention to the present moment to avoid unpleasant consequences if one is not attentive. The sighting of the bird can also be seen as an encouragement to be grateful for the smallest things in life. In another sense, spotting the robin might mean that much thought has been given to the concept of family. It could also be a sign to strengthen the bonds with the people close to us. When you consider this meaning, it's quite clear that the robin probably appeared as a sign that Jack is still with Mary. It could even be that Jack appeared to his mother in the form of a bird on the anniversary of his death. Mary's video on Facebook was viewed over 7 million times, and thousands of people shared the video and commented that it was indeed Jack who gave his mother the robin as a sign. Seeing that a loved one gives us a sign can be all that's needed to move on after their loss. With such signs, one can almost be sure that he or she is watching over and there for us over the years, since the dawn of time. Many cases similar to what happened to Mary have been reported. Most of these signs appearing in the form of butterflies, while others appeared as feathers, coins, dragonflies, scents, and dreams. Although each has its own meaning, they could all be connected to whether a loved one is close by or just trying to send a sign. In an article published on Today.com, several people shared their experiences with signs they received from their deceased loved ones. A user named Karen Schultz recounted how her mother-in-law gave her a sign in the form of a butterfly. She said, "Just before my mother-in-law passed away, she asked her granddaughter what animal she would come back as, and she quickly answered, as a monarch butterfly. When she passed away, we saw butterflies everywhere. The flower arrangement my husband and I ordered for her funeral even included a butterfly without us asking for it. I am convinced that these are messages from her, that she is still with us." Another user, Abby, reported a similar situation with butterflies. She said, "It's been more than a year since my grandmother was murdered. This Saturday would have been her 70th birthday. Since she died, I see a plethora of butterflies. I don't just see them randomly. They always seem to find their way to me. I even have a yellow butterfly as part of my memorial tattoo for her. I know the pain you feel, but it is comforting to know that our loved ones send us signs that they are okay." In the same article, a user named Katie mentioned that when my husband was diagnosed with cancer, in his final stage of illness, he woke me up at 2:30 a.m. to see a deer eating the dahlias outside our window, flowers he had planted himself. Now, whenever I see a deer on my home camera, I'm pretty sure it's him. In another story by Kelly Sophie, it says that my nanny passed away in 2002. Whenever I see a butterfly, I think of her. Earlier this year, we visited my grandfather's grave in Cassino, Italy. A blue butterfly, which was Nanny's favorite color, followed me around the cemetery. I knew she was with us as we visited her husband, who fell in the Second World War in 1944. Grieving can be incredibly tough, especially when it involves a child, and although sometimes it may seem like there is no way out or no chance to recover, there always is. It might take some time, and you will never forget your child. But you will be able to move forward and continue with the constant memory that they are looking down on you, hoping you are also well. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up, leave a comment in the section below, and share it with others. Next, to give you another story, let's continue to see it. To bid a final farewell to her deceased mother, a little girl placed her mobile phone in her mother's coffin as a symbol that they would always be connected. However, when she received a call from her mother's grave, she was horrified by what she heard. As the sun set over the horizon, tinting the sky pink and blue, Abby and her family approached the chapel where the wake for her mother, Mary, was to be held. The atmosphere was heavy, and the silence was only broken by the sobbing and tears of those present. People gathered, dressed in black out of respect for the family's pain and mourning. The chapel was adorned with white flowers, Mary's favorite. Creating a stark contrast to the room's darkness, the wooden coffin stood at the center of the room, surrounded by candles that flickered in the gentle breeze coming through the open windows. Abby, in her little black dress and a ribbon in her hair, slowly approached the coffin, holding her Aunt Laura's hand. Her heart raced, and tears streamed down her face, knowing that she would be saying her last goodbye to her mother. As she looked at her mother for the last time, the little girl could see the peace on her face, as if she had finally been freed from the pain that had plagued her in the final months. During the wake, friends and family took turns at the podium, sharing memories and stories about Mary. The little girl, Abby, listened attentively, smiling through her tears as she remembered the happy moments they had shared together. Abby, just 11 years old, was facing the most difficult time of her life. She had lost her mother to breast cancer, which had claimed her life despite all treatment attempts. Her mother had always been her safe haven. Abby's life had always been a challenge, facing the world alone with her mother, Mary, a determined single mother, had always strived to give her daughter everything she needed, even on her bad days. The two shared a special bond, and the woman was not only her daughter's best friend but also her confidant. With this loss, Abby knew her life would be even more challenging. She would face the unknown without the presence and support of the person who had taught her everything she knew. However, she would not be completely alone on this journey. The little girl moved in with her Aunt Laura, Mary's sister, who had always loved her niece and helped her sister as much as possible. Laura had no children of her own and was ready to take Abby in and care for her, giving her all the love and affection she needed during this tragic time. The two sat together, their eyes red and their handkerchiefs damp from tears. Aunt Laura put her arm around her niece, offering comfort. At the wake's close, people began bidding farewell to Mary. They placed flowers and spoke comforting words to her daughter, Laura. It was then that Abby gathered her courage and stood up, holding her mother's mobile phone tightly in her trembling hands. Her aunt looked at her and understood what the girl intended to do. "Are you sure, dear?" Laura asked. Concerned about her niece's feelings, the little girl nodded, trying to hold back her tears. "I want her to know that I'll always be with her, even if we can't talk anymore," said the poor girl, her voice choked with emotion. She walked slowly towards the coffin, feeling the weight of each step and a mix of sadness, fear, and unrest in her little heart. She knew this would be her last goodbye and she wanted it to be meaningful, a way to internalize the connection she had with her mother. Carefully placing the mobile phone next to her body, Abby whispered, "Mama, I love you so much. Now you'll always have a part of me with you, and whenever I miss you, I'll imagine that you're just a call away." This object symbolized the bond between mother and daughter, which had always been very strong, even during the last months when the hospital was locked down due to COVID-19 and the little girl couldn't visit her mother. The mobile phone became their only means of communication, through which they exchanged messages, made video calls, and shared the important moments of daily life. This constant communication strengthened their bond and helped overcome the physical barrier imposed by the hospital isolation. For Abby, the mobile phone symbolized her mother's unconditional love, friendship, and support, which she always felt from her best friend. By placing it in the coffin, she was, in a way, perpetuating this connection and keeping alive the memories of the moments they had shared. In her final moments, tears streamed down the little girl's face as she walked away from the coffin. Laura approached her niece and embraced her, sharing the pain and longing that the little girl felt. Together, they would face the uncertain future, keeping the memory of their beloved mother and sister alive in their hearts. The first night after the funeral was tragic for the poor little girl. Her aunt had carefully prepared everything and placed some photos of Mary and Abby around the room, hoping that it would bring her some comfort. However, as she looked at the pictures, the longing felt even stronger in her chest. Lying in bed, she tried to sleep, but her thoughts were filled with memories of the wake. As the young girl tossed and turned, she clutched her pillow tightly against her chest as if it could alleviate the pain she was feeling. Tears streamed down her face, allowing herself the release even as she held onto her pillow, trying to make sense of why her mother was taken from her so early. She was overwhelmed by fear, anger, and sadness, but above all, there was a deep, consuming pain. Poor girl, but life had to go on. The next day, in her aunt's house, which would now be her new home, she had breakfast. Her aunt, who had to go to work despite her own grief, now had a child to care for in the house. Laura, the manicurist, kissed the girl, telling her, "Abby, I'll be back later. In the meantime, make yourself comfortable because this house is now yours. When I come back, we'll go to your house to pick up a few more things, okay? Also, Helena, our neighbor next door, is there if you need anything. Just give her a call, okay?" The little girl agreed, saying that she would start getting used to this new reality without her mother's constant presence and support. The memory of the last goodbye and the phone left in the casket still moved her deeply, but she found some solace in the idea that her mother, in some way, would always be with her. So, as soon as her aunt left, she used the moment of solitude to explore the new house and find a room where she could connect with her mother's memory, while Abby was digging through Mary's belongings, hoping to find something that might comfort her. Her own mobile phone rang. Startled and a bit scared, she picked it up and looked at the screen. Her heart stopped for a moment when she saw her mother's name on the call display. Hesitating, overwhelmed by fear and surprise that made her tremble. How could Mary be calling? Hadn't she placed her mother's mobile phone in the casket? Then, out of breath and with sweaty hands, the little girl answered the call. "Mama," Abby asked, her voice trembling and uncertain. "My darling, where am I?" replied the woman, her voice weak and coughing. The little girl couldn't believe what she was hearing. It was really her mother. Tears began to run down her face as fear and disbelief mingled in her heart. "How is this possible, Mama? You're dead," sobbed the poor little girl, trying to control her crying. "Darling, where am I? What is this dark, tight place?" Mary gasped. Her daughter was shocked but at the same time felt a wave of relief wash over her. It was truly a blessing that her mother was still somehow present in her life. She could feel her heart racing as fear and love battled within her chest. "Mommy, Mommy, where are you? I miss you so much." The little girl began to cry. "Mommy, what's wrong?" she asked between sobs. "Abby, Abby," and the call abruptly ended, leaving a deafening silence in the room. Abby, still trying to comprehend what had just happened, began to desperately call out, "Mommy, Mommy." She was confused and scared, not knowing whether what she had experienced was real or just a dream. She tried to call back, but no one answered, so she called Laura. As soon as Laura heard her niece's distressed voice, she knew something was wrong and rushed from her work to meet the girl. When she arrived home, she found the little girl crying and trembling, still holding the phone in her hands. The girl tried to explain what had happened, telling her about the call and Mary's voice on the other end of the line. However, Laura could not believe the story. She thought the girl was just missing her mother and might even be hallucinating due to stress and grief. So, she hugged her tightly, trying to comfort and calm her. "Everything is going to be okay, my love. I know you miss your mother. We all do," she said while stroking the little girl's hair. "But remember that she is watching over us and will always be in our hearts." The little girl continued to cry, frustrated and scared that her aunt did not believe what had happened, but deep down, she knew it was difficult for anyone to accept the idea that Mary had called from the coffin. The girl snuggled into the woman's arms, seeking some comfort and reassurance while trying to understand the mystery behind the call. The calls, however, kept coming, and Abby began to doubt her own sanity. Each time her phone rang, her heart raced, and she felt a mix of fear and hope. Was it her mother again, or was she just imagining it? The calls became more frequent, and the conversations with her mother grew increasingly terrifying. On one occasion, Mary sounded completely frightened. "Abby, my darling, I don't know where I am. It's such a dark and confined place. I can't breathe," she cried, her voice trembling and breathless. The terror took over the little girl's body. "Mommy, I don't know what to do. I will ask Aunt Laura for help," the little girl said desperately, trying somehow to help her mother. She continued, "Mom, please try to stay calm. I will do something, I promise," she cried, tears streaming down her face. But then the caller ended the call again. The calls became increasingly intense, and Abby began to doubt whether she was really speaking with her mother or if she was going mad. Poor thing, she decided not to tell her aunt anymore, fearing she wouldn't believe her or would think she was crazy. This started to truly affect the life of the little girl. She had difficulties concentrating in school, couldn't sleep properly, and was constantly nervous and frightened. One night, Laura found the girl desperately crying in her room. She was scared and believed that Mary was still trapped in the SAR. Faced with the situation, the little girl decided to tell her aunt the whole truth about the constant calls and conversations with her mother, concerned and unsure how to handle it. The woman asked to see the call log on Abby's mobile phone. "It's here, Auntie," said the little girl, showing the phone. "Princess, there is nothing here." Laura looked at the call log, and the girl was perplexed. There was no evidence of the calls. "No, it was here, Auntie. I swear it was here." And the poor little girl began to cry. Seeing the scene, her aunt realized how much she was suffering and decided to help the little girl. She made an appointment with a therapist specializing in grief and trauma. She knew the little girl needed professional support to cope with the loss of her mother and these inexplicable experiences. At the first appointment, the psychologist listened attentively to Abby's story and her concerns. He explained that post-traumatic stress could manifest in various ways and that the phone calls might be a form of auditory hallucination, a result of the girl's grief and longing for her mother. The little girl began attending weekly therapy sessions, and gradually things began to improve. She learned to deal with the pain of loss and to understand that the calls were a way her brain tried to cope with the lessons Mary had left behind. During the sessions, she opened up about her feelings, sometimes crying, sometimes laughing as she remembered the happy time she had with her best friend. Laura accompanied her throughout the entire process, often attending sessions with her niece, offering her shoulder and her love. Together, they faced their pain and found strength in each other, forming an even deeper bond. Then, as time passed, the imaginary connections diminished and eventually stopped altogether. The therapy was effective, and Abby began to feel lighter and more peaceful. She rediscovered the joy of being with her friends and her family, having fun, and learning. Her life got back on track, even in the absence of her beloved mother. As the girl progressed, those around her watched with satisfaction and pride, always encouraging her to express her feelings and accept that life must go on despite any pain. During this time, her aunt underwent a transformation as well, becoming an even more present maternal figure to the young girl. Together, they shared moments of affection and mutual support, creating new memories and strengthening their bond. This helped them become a united and loving family. As the girl grew older, she continued on her path of recovery and discovered the power of resilience. She learned that despite adversity and the enduring pain of loss, it was possible to move forward and find the strength to face life's challenges. She learned to cherish the happy moments and the people by her side even more. Abby carried on, keeping memories of her beloved mother in her heart and leading a fulfilled and joyful life. Surrounded by love and support, the imaginary connections eventually became a distant part of her past, a memory of a difficult time that brought valuable lessons for her and everyone around her. Years passed, and Abby grew into a talented and determined young woman, ready to embark on the next phase of her life, college. As she packed her belongings to move to another city, she decided to take some of her mother's possessions to keep Mary close. Amidst the organization, she found something unusual. A diary, carefully hidden among her mother's things. Curious, as she had never seen this diary before, she felt a strong urge to discover what Mary had written. Inside, the diary contained records of happy moments, worries, and reflections. Abby was deeply moved as she read the words filled with love and affection, feeling her mother's presence in those pages. As she flipped through the pages, enjoying the stories, she came across a note that puzzled her. It was something her mother had written about a dream she had a few months before her death. In the dream, Mary described finding herself scared and trapped in a tight, dark, suffocating place. The darkness was so dense and oppressive, seeping into every pore of her being, intensifying her claustrophobia. Somehow, she managed to communicate with Abby using her cell phone. But she had no idea how it had gotten there. It was the last glimmer of hope that kept her connected to the outside world. With a trembling voice from crying, she described the overwhelming terror and confusion that had overtaken her in this terrible nightmare, and the feeling of helplessness and fear was almost unbearable as the thin air around her seemed to constrict even tighter. As despair slowly suffocated me, the desperation in my heart grew with each passing second. I tirelessly searched for a way to escape the confinement and protect my daughter. The responsibility and love I felt for her drove me to fight against the panic and suffocation, hoping that together we could find a way out of this terrible nightmare. But then everything turned dark. Abby got goosebumps reading these words, barely able to think. Could it be that the calls she received were merely the result of her post-traumatic stress? Or could it be that her mother, in some inexplicable way, like in a dream described in her diary, was communicating with her beyond death? The young woman closed the diary, feeling a mix of emotions. On one hand, these words brought back painful memories, but they also made her feel closer to her mother. Perhaps the truth behind the mysterious phone calls would never be fully clarified, but the girl knew that her mother would somehow always be with her. Do you have any thoughts after hearing the above two stories? We'd like to hear your thoughts. Tell us in the comments section. That's all for today's story. Please subscribe and give a thumb up. See you next time.